With this ruling, he continued, the court denies all prior petitions for guardianship, supervision, or competency review permanently. My mother's head snapped up. No! The gavel struck. Furthermore, the judge said, this court orders an immediate protective boundary. My attorney's posture changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. My mother's breathing turned ragged. You are to have no unsupervised contact with your daughter, the judge said. No direct contact for a minimum of 18 months. Her face crumpled. You can't do that, she cried. I'm her mother. The judge met her gaze. That, he said, is precisely why I am. A sound escaped her throat that I had never heard before. Not rage, not manipulation, fear. The judge set his pen down. This court also refers the matter to the appropriate authorities for review of past filings, he added, including the misuse of medical and legal systems to exert control. My mother's shoulders began to shake. I didn't move, didn't react, didn't look at her, because I knew, if I did, she would try to pull me back into the story. The judge turned to me. Ms. Tambert, he said gently, you are free to leave. Just like that. Not forgiven, not erased. Freed. As I stood, the courtroom seemed to tilt. My mother reached out instinctively, fingers grasping at air. Please, she whispered. You don't understand what you're doing. I paused. Not because she deserved it. Because I did. I turned just enough to look at her. Not with anger, not with triumph. With clarity. I understand, I said quietly. That's why I stayed silent. Then I walked out. Behind me, the doors closed with a sound that felt less like an ending and more like a lock clicking into place. And my mother finally learned what silence sounds like when it's no longer hers to control. I didn't stop walking until I reached the courthouse steps. The air outside felt sharper, colder, like my lungs had to relearn how to breathe without permission. Behind me, the heavy doors shut. Not slammed, not dramatic, just closed. For most people, that sound would have meant the end of a hearing. For me, it meant the end of a lifetime sentence. I stood there for a moment, my heels planted on stone worn smooth by generations of people walking in with fear and leaving with something unresolved. Reporters were already gathering near the railings. I could hear my mother's name whispered, confused, distorted. I didn't turn around. My attorney stepped beside me. It's over, she said softly. I nodded. But it wasn't relief I felt. It was stillness, the kind that comes when the noise finally stops and you realize how loud it had always been. For as long as I could remember, my mother's voice had lived in my head, correcting me, questioning me, warning me. Don't say that. They'll think you're lying, you'll embarrass me. Now, there was nothing. No commentary, no threat, no narrative waiting to be hijacked. Just quiet. 3 days later, the official order arrived. Restraining conditions, no contact, no intermediaries, no concerned emails routed through relatives. The court had anticipated everything. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and opened a notebook I'd kept hidden for years. The first page was dated from when I was 16. If I ever tell the truth, I'll lose everything. I closed it gently, because the truth was, I hadn't lost anything. I had gained something my mother could never give me. Ownership. She still tells people her version, I'm sure. That she was misunderstood, that the court was biased, that I turned everyone against her. She needs a story where she isn't empty-handed. I don't. Because the last thing my mother ever said to me in court wasn't screamed. It wasn't cruel. It was a plea. And I didn't answer. Not out of revenge, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't need to. Silence had finally changed sides. For the first time in that courtroom, she wasn't controlling the narrative. She wasn't even part of it anymore. She had done what she always did, talked too much. And this time, the room remembered every word. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Ms. Namt, he said, looking directly at my mother, you testified under oath that your daughter is mentally unstable. My mother stared at the table in front of her, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. He nodded. And you also acknowledged that the voice on that recording was yours. She didn't respond this time. The judge waited. Still nothing. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question, he continued, and I'd like a very simple answer. He leaned forward just slightly. If your daughter is delusional, why did you threaten to have her committed if she told the truth? My mother's head snapped up. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. Too quickly. I was trying to calm her down. The judge's expression didn't change. By threatening institutionalization, she was hysterical. According to whom? He asked. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, looked around the courtroom as if someone might rescue her. No one did. You also told this court, the judge continued, that you've always acted in your daughter's best interest. He picked up one last page from the file. Can you explain, he asked calmly, why you attempted to gain full legal control over an adult child whom multiple evaluations found competent? My mother's breathing became shallow. That was just paperwork, she said weakly. I never expected it to go anywhere. The judge tilted his head. So you filed for guardianship, he said, not because she was unwell, but because you thought no one would question you. Her face collapsed. I'm her mother, she said desperately. I know what's best. The judge paused. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Do you? The room held its breath. My mother's lips trembled. Her hands shook. She searched my face like she always had, looking for permission, for fear, for submission. She found none. I gave her everything, she cried. She wouldn't even exist without me. The judge nodded slowly. That, he said, is not an answer. He turned to my attorney. Counsel, he said, are there any remaining exhibits? My attorney stood. One, she said. But we believe the court may wish to address the matter of credibility first. The judge exhaled and sat back. I agree, he said quietly. He looked at my mother one last time. Ms., you came into this courtroom believing your daughter was on trial. He paused. She is not. My mother's eyes widened. You are. And for the first time since I was a child, I watched the truth do what I never could. Stand on its own. When the judge picked up his pen, I knew something irreversible was about to be written. And my mother knew it too. The judge took longer than I expected, not because he was unsure, because he was being careful. He adjusted the papers in front of him, aligning the edges with deliberate precision, like a man preparing to say something that could not be taken back. My mother sat frozen, hands clenched in her lap, eyes fixed on his pen. I am going to be very clear, the judge said at last, because clarity matters in cases like this. He looked directly at her. You came before this court asserting that your daughter is mentally unfit, that she fabricates reality, that she poses a danger. My mother nodded faintly, like a child hoping agreement might still save her. The evidence shows the opposite, he continued, repeatedly, consistently, over decades. He turned one page. What is consistent, he said, is a pattern of coercion, control, and documented psychological abuse. My mother let out a sound, half sob, half protest. No, she whispered. You don't understand our family. The judge didn't raise his voice. I understand documentation, he said. He signed one paper, then another. Doctor, he said, did you document that diagnosis? Yes, Dr. Porter replied, in reports signed and received by the parent. My mother's face crumpled, not into tears, but into something worse, confusion, because she remembered now. The sessions she cut short, the letters she never read, the paperwork she signed without caring what it said. You told this court, the judge said slowly, that your daughter fabricates accusations. He looked directly at my mother. Dr. Porter's testimony suggests the opposite. My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. She turned you against me. Dr. Porter closed her folder. No, she said. You did that yourself. The judge exhaled. Court will recess for 15 minutes. The gavel struck, and as everyone stood, my mother finally turned toward me, not with anger, not with superiority, but with panic, because for the first time, she understood something terrible. I hadn't stayed silent because I was weak. I stayed silent because every word she spoke was tightening the net. And when court resumed, it was going to close. When we came back into the courtroom, my mother was already crying, not quietly, not gracefully. This was the loud, breathless kind, the kind meant to pull the room back into her orbit. She dabbed at her eyes, shoulders shaking, as if grief itself had ambushed her in the hallway. I watched from my seat, hands folded, expression neutral. I had seen this performance my whole life. The judge settled back into his chair. Miss Sapp, he said evenly, please compose yourself. I am composed, my mother sobbed. I'm just a mother watching her daughter destroy herself. There it was, the final pivot. If anger didn't work, she would become the victim. My attorney stood. Your Honor, before we proceed, we request permission to play Exhibit 12. My mother froze. What exhibit? She asked sharply. The judge glanced at the docket. Granted. A technician stepped forward and turned on the screen mounted beside the bench. My mother twisted in her seat, eyes darting. The video began with no sound, just a date stamp in the corner. 3 years ago. The image steadied to show a familiar kitchen. Her kitchen, white cabinets, granite counters, the vase she loved positioned just right for company. And then her voice came through the speakers. Sharp, clear, unmistakable. "You don't remember things right," she said in the video. "I decide what happened." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. My mother shot to her feet. "That's illegal!" The judge slammed his gavel. "Sit down!" On the screen, my younger self stood just out of frame. Only my hands were visible, trembling, gripping the edge of the counter. "I just want you to tell the truth," I said on the recording. My mother laughed. "You don't get the truth," she replied. "You get what I allow." Gasps, whispers. Someone behind me muttered, "Jesus Christ." My mother turned to the judge, frantic. "She manipulated that. She edited—" The judge raised a hand. "The recording has already been authenticated." On screen, my mother leaned closer to the camera. "If you tell anyone," her recorded voice said calmly, "I'll have them committed you so fast you won't know what hit you." Silence fell like a weight, not the sympathetic silence from before. This was different. This was the sound of people recalibrating everything they thought they knew. My mother's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The video ended. The screen went black. The judge looked at her, not with anger, not with pity, with something colder. "You testified," he said slowly, "that your daughter fabricated accusations." He gestured toward the screen. "Was that your voice?" My mother shook her head wildly. "She tricked me. She provoked me." "So that is your voice," he clarified. She sagged. "Yes," she whispered. The judge nodded once. "Thank you," he said. "No further clarification needed." My mother collapsed back into her chair, hands over her face. My mother's face drained of color. "You told this court your daughter records conversations obsessively," the judge continued. "Keeps journals, tries to document things." He looked up. "Did you know why?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "According to these notes," he said, "she was advised to do so, by professionals, as a protective measure." The silence was no longer sympathetic. It was clinical. The judge leaned back slightly. "Ms. Bunn," he said to my mother, "do you remember signing this final form?" She shook her head, breathing faster now. "It's dated 3 years ago," he said. "You requested full custody control under the assertion that your adult daughter was mentally incompetent." A murmur spread through the gallery. "That request was denied," the judge continued, "because of these evaluations." He folded his hands. "And yet today, under oath, you repeated the same claims." My mother looked around the room, searching for something, someone, to save her. I stayed perfectly still. The judge's voice softened just slightly. "You weren't protecting your daughter, were you?" My mother's lips trembled. "You were protecting yourself," she whispered, barely audible. "That's not fair." The judge nodded once. "No," he said. "But it is documented?" He turned to my attorney. "You may call your next witness." And for the first time, my mother realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a record, and she had written it herself. My attorney stood slowly. No theatrics, no rush, just calm, like someone who already knew how this ended. "Your Honor," she said, "the defense calls Dr. Elaine Porter." My mother stiffened. The name hit her before the woman did. A side door opened, and an older woman stepped into the courtroom. Gray hair pulled back neatly, sensible shoes, a leather folder held against her chest like a shield. She didn't look at me. She looked straight at my mother, and for the first time that day, my mother looked afraid. "Doctor." Porter was sworn in and took her seat. "Dr. Porter," my attorney began, "can you state your qualifications for the record?" "Yes," she said calmly. "I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I specialized in adolescent trauma and family systems for 32 years. She paused. "I evaluated the defendant when she was 14. My mother leaned forward. "That was decades ago." Dr. Porter didn't even glance at her. "Yes," she said, "and I remember it clearly." The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the hum of the lights. "Why?" my attorney asked. "Because," Dr. Porter said, opening her folder, "it was one of the few cases where the child was not my primary concern." A ripple moved through the gallery. "My concern," she continued, "was the parent." My mother shook her head sharply. "That's ridiculous." Dr. Porter finally looked at her. "No," she said evenly. "It was documented." She turned to the judge. At 14, Your Honor, this child displayed no signs of mental illness. What she displayed was hypervigilance, fear of speaking freely, and an unusual habit of carefully choosing words. She glanced at me then, just briefly. That behavior doesn't come from instability, she said. It comes from conditioning. My mother's voice cracked. You're twisting things. Dr. Porter lifted a single page. This is my original recommendation, she said. Family therapy, boundaries, reduced parental control. She lowered it. The parent refused. My mother slammed her hand on the stand. Because she was lying. The judge raised a hand. Ma'am, she's always been manipulative, my mother snapped, pointing at me. She makes people feel sorry for her. Dr. Porter didn't flinch. She was 14, she said quietly. That landed harder than any accusation. The judge leaned forward. Dr. Porter, he asked, did you ever diagnose the defendant with a mental disorder? No, she said firmly. I diagnosed emotional abuse. My mother gasped, loud and sharp. That's defamatory. The judge didn't look at her. She doesn't remember things accurately. She records conversations, keeps journals, obsessive things. She's always trying to prove something. That one almost made me smile, because she was right. I do record things. The judge glanced down at the file in front of him for the first time since my mother began speaking. His expression didn't change, but his fingers paused on the page. My mother didn't notice. She's very convincing, she warned. That's the dangerous part. If you listen to her, you'll think she's reasonable. The irony was almost elegant. The judge looked up. Ms. Ka, he said calmly, addressing me for the first time that day. Do you wish to respond? Every head in the courtroom snapped toward me. This was it, the moment I was supposed to speak, to deny, to defend, to unravel. I met the judge's eyes and shook my head once. No, Your Honor. A murmur rippled through the room. My mother turned toward me, startled. Her smile faltered for half a second. The judge nodded slowly. Very well. He turned back to her. Ma'am, he said, you've made several serious claims today. My mother lifted her chin. Because they're true. He folded his hands. Then you won't mind if we review the exhibits you've already authenticated. Her brow furrowed. Exhibits? She asked. That was the first time I saw it. The flicker of uncertainty. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, my mother didn't know what was coming next. The judge didn't look at me when he spoke next. He looked at my mother. You testified, he said evenly, that your daughter fabricates memories, exaggerates events, and cannot reliably distinguish reality from delusion. My mother nodded, solemn. Yes, Your Honor. And that she has required intervention since childhood. Yes. And that you have consistently acted in her best interest. Always, my mother said without hesitation. The judge glanced down at the folder in front of him. Then I want to be very clear, he said. Everything we're about to review came from you. My mother smiled, relieved. Of course. That smile lasted exactly 3 seconds. The bailiff approached the witness stand and placed a thin stack of papers beside her. Nothing dramatic, no thick binders, no photos blown up on screens, just documents. My mother barely glanced at them. These are medical authorization forms, the judge continued, signed by you over a span of 15 years. My mother blinked. I don't understand. You authorized evaluations, he said calmly. School records, psychological consults, treatment recommendations. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the stand. And, he added, you also authorized the release of those records. The room felt smaller. I was her parent, my mother said defensively. I had to. Yes, the judge agreed, which is why your signature appears on every page. He turned one sheet around so she could see it. Do you recognize this? She leaned forward, squinting. That's just paperwork. It's a summary, he said, from a licensed child psychologist you selected when your daughter was 14. My mother swallowed. The judge read aloud, no evidence of psychosis, no indication of delusional disorder. Patient reports fear-based compliance in the presence of primary caregiver. A hush fell over the courtroom. My mother laughed lightly. That's out of context. The judge didn't react. Here's another, he said, flipping the page. And another. And another. Each one the same. Different years, different providers, same conclusion, no mental illness, no instability, no danger, just one consistent variable. My mother. She was coached, my mother snapped. She manipulates people. That's what she does. The judge raised an eyebrow. Interesting, he said, because these reports also include follow-up notes. He tapped the page once. Parent declined recommended family therapy. Parent insisted further evaluation was unnecessary. Parent requested records be sealed. The word sealed landed hard. The first thing my mother did when she took the stand was look straight at me and smile. Not a warm smile, not a proud one, the kind you give when you think you've already won. She's mentally sick, my mother said loudly, before anyone had even asked her a question. Her voice echoed through the courtroom like she was announcing a diagnosis, not destroying her own child. Gasps rippled behind me. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't flinch. My attorney stiffened beside me, waiting for my reaction. The judge raised a hand, but my mother was already leaning forward, emboldened. "She lies compulsively," she continued. "She's always had delusions. We've tried everything. Doctors, therapy, medication. Nothing works." She shook her head slowly, like a grieving saint burdened with a broken daughter. I stared at the wood grain of the table in front of me and counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. This was the moment everyone thought would break me. Because for 36 years, my mother had controlled every room she entered. Family dinners, holidays, hospitals, funerals. If she cried, the story became hers. If she screamed, people listened. If she lied, no one questioned it, because she looked so concerned while doing it. And I had learned something very young. When my mother feels powerful, she talks too much. "She doesn't know who she is," my mother went on, warming to the sound of her own voice. "She invents stories, accuses her own family, and now she's dragged us into court because she needs attention." She turned toward the judge, eyes shining with practiced anguish. "Your Honor, my daughter is dangerous to herself and others. She shouldn't be allowed to testify at all." The courtroom went completely silent. Everyone was waiting for me to react, to cry, to scream, to finally snap and prove her right. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and said nothing. Because what no one in that room knew, what my mother never bothered to find out, was that I hadn't come to court to defend myself. I had come to let her talk. The judge didn't interrupt her again. He just leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and said calmly, "Please continue, ma'am." And that's when my mother made the mistake that would cost her everything. My mother didn't hesitate. She never does when she thinks she's rescuing an audience from me. "She's been unstable since childhood," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "Mood swings, paranoia, false memories. She accuses people of abuse that never happened." Never happened. I felt my jaw tighten just once. I forced it to relax. My mother glanced at me, checking to see if she'd landed the blow. When I didn't react, she mistook it for weakness and stepped closer to the edge. "She even believes I tried to harm her," my mother continued, "which is heartbreaking. I devoted my life to that girl. I sacrificed everything." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd brought specifically for this moment. "I'm only here because I love her," she said softly, "and because someone has to protect the truth." That's when I felt it. The familiar pressure behind my ribs. Not panic, anticipation, because this wasn't the first time my mother had tried to rewrite my life in public. When I was 12, she told my pediatrician I was exaggerating injuries. When I was 19, she told my college counselor I was emotionally fragile. When I was 27, she told my employer I was confused during a dispute she'd caused. Every time, she spoke for me. Every time people believed her. And every time, she got a little bolder. "Your Honor," she said now, voice trembling perfectly, "I believe my daughter needs supervision, for her own safety." The word hung in the air. Supervision. The kind that strips you of choices, of credibility, of control. I heard my attorney inhale sharply beside me. The judge tilted his head. "You're suggesting a competency concern?" "Yes," my mother said quickly. Too quickly. "Absolutely." She straightened, emboldened by the seriousness of the moment.